Style guide point number 1 is shadow shapes and how he uses them. Now, in terms of the kind of training we have in Western ateliers, shadows are generally treated as a unified value shape. This is because of the primary dominant light source situations that we make most of our drawings in. And in fact, the light source that we find on this drawing is not particularly different. It comes from the upper left-hand side and leaves a good 3/4 edge in between the light shape here and the shadow shapes on the right-hand facing planes of the face. Only here's the catch. In this case, shadows are not treated in a uniform fashion. We find some shadows, like the one on the nose, which does conform to a similar shadows atmosphere type model. But the majority of the shadows, which are on the head and neck, do not conform at all to this idea. In fact, I would say that for the most part, in this drawing, the shadows are treated as the form and the light shape is treated as the atmosphere. When we look at the light shape of the forehead and the light shape on the left-hand side of the face, we find that the lights are almost totally blown out. There's very little meaningful and form-rendering halftone used in those areas. In fact, most of the left-hand contour of the face is totally blown out and lost into the background. So what do I find interesting and impactful about this? We find that in this drawing there are two conceptual models for shadow shapes being used simultaneously. I think he's doing this because large, flat, dark shapes on a white paper will draw attention into them. And while the very dark shadow of the nose draws us into the center of the face, right in the middle of the features, a large and flat shadow being expressed throughout all of the dark areas of the head would be flat and blunt and uninteresting. So, you should be able to distinguish between shadow and light in the drawing, but your choice as to the unity and darkness of the shadow should be governed by how useful it is to the composition you're trying to make. That means shadow is not necessarily atmosphere and light is not necessarily form, nor is the inverse true. Shadows are simply shapes just like any other shape on a 2D surface, and we should feel free to break them up or unify them as need dictates. The second point in the style guide is actually related quite closely to the first one. In Grebennekov's drawings, a value shape is not just a value shape. It's also a texture. In this drawing, I can point to only maybe one shape that is actually a totally unified value. And even then, it's just on the borderline of being unified. Every area in the drawing where we find a large area of value that should either represent a plane or simply a mass of darkness, there is a meaningful and purposeful texture applied to it. If we look at the dark halftones on the upper right-hand side of the forehead leading towards the hair, instead of an even and undifferentiated gradient of graphite, we find harsh striations made by pencil marks hatched across the form. I could go through just about every single part of the drawing and point out how applications of value that are there to render form or show a mass of darkness are imbued with a kind of frenetic energy by the textures he's applied to them. This to me represents one of the core components that gives this style its heavy metal feeling. The third point I want to make, and this is going to be quite divisive and I think difficult to grab a hold of, but in the case of Grebennekov's drawings, accuracy is not the key. If you look at this portrait from a constructive perspective, assessing where the center line is and how the features of the head relate to it, you'll find actually that there are quite a few asymmetries in the way those features are arranged. One of the things that Ivan brought up when I talked to him about this drawing was very insightful. He said that Grebennekov's story was a lie, but that it was a beautiful lie, and so we didn't mind that it was untrue. It makes me think of other maxims that I've heard in my life. Like, have you ever heard the one that says, don't let the truth stand in the way of a good story? I think that those two are analogous, and that they teach us a really fascinating lesson about storytelling. I'll end this section with one last maxim. Every great lie contains a kernel of the truth. For me, this distinction between lying with our drawing or accurately telling the truth is not a black and white issue. It's very much about balance. If your drawing is so inaccurate that it no longer resembles something real, we have told too much of the lie and the story is not good. If our beautiful lie contains a kernel of the truth that satisfies the viewer, then we've done a good job.
If you think this lesson is pretty interesting so far, and you think this is the kind of course that could really benefit you as an artist, you should know that it's available on my Patreon page, and for just a $10 subscription, you can get access to this course and all of the other courses I've been making for like 7 years. They're all focused on getting you to perform better in portrait drawing and portrait painting specifically. If that sounds kind of cool and kind of affordable to you, there's a link in the description of this video that will take you to my Patreon page where you're going to learn a ton of stuff and actually get better at drawing.
Point number 4 in the style guide is this. Detail is a pattern. Now, if you've studied with me before, you've heard me say that drawing is a relatively low resolution exercise. All you have to do is look at a 1000 megapixel image of a face and then look at a traditional portrait drawing, and you'll see just how much information is lost when we translate something into graphite. I think that Grebennekov was deeply aware of this and wanted to subvert that fact in his manufacturing. So if when you are drawing you need to be broad and fast and loose, how do you also account for the need for detail in your drawing? Well, you start to treat detail like a system or a pattern. That way we don't draw every single hair, but we draw a systematic texture over the hair, so that we also don't draw every single wrinkle in the face, but when we apply values to plane shifts, we apply textured values to those plane shifts. That when we create a rendering or turning of form, like at the bottom of the chin, or even inside the shadow on the neck on the lower right. In each of these areas, those values are not simply gradients, they're textures, and this texture communicates detail. If you establish this as a mandate in your drawing practice, you're going to create an orchestrated field of texture that exists right alongside your representation. That way, when you come to the end of the drawing, instead of having a flat and serene looking portrait, you'll have a drawing that is simmering and writhing with detail and variety that sits just inside the representational form. The next principle is pretty simple, but it needs to be said. Drawing is an abstract exercise. At no point does Grebennekov make a drawing of an eye, or a nose, or a set of lips. Instead, he uses a series of shapes and textures at varying degrees of value that, when viewed together, conspire to create the illusion of a face. To recognize the delta in between these two realities, all we have to do is look at Grebennekov in relationship to an actual source image of a model. Look at the way his drawing of an ear looks nothing like an actual ear. Yet it stands in symbolically to represent that feature. All it is a series of shapes with varying degrees of gradient and texture that give us an impression of that feature. The next point on the list is that we should maximize edge and value contrast. In this drawing, we have edges that are completely blown out and lost, either into the background or into the darkness of the hair. Grebennekov here is intent on using the complete spectrum of available edge quality. He is taking the sharpest possible contrast that he can and juxtaposing those against the absolutely softest blown out edges that he's capable of making. In addition to that, no contrast is spared. I promise you that when I was making a study of this drawing, I pressed about as hard as I could with a 9B pencil to try and mimic some of the contrast that he gets in between the white of the paper and his darkest darks. You're going to have to work hard to match the level of contrast that he's aspiring to. So we're going to maximize the difference in quality of edges from sharp to soft, and also the quality of value from light to dark. The next point on the list is that there is little to no conventional shading taking place in this drawing. Meaning, if we need to transition from shadow to light, we're going to do it by using the edge of a piece of charcoal and rubbing it across the surface to create a kind of textured ground that seems to, in some chaotic way, get us from one plane to the next one. At no point do we see the conventional rendering of form that we would find, for example, in one of Charles Bargues's lithographs. However, I want to be clear in saying this. The existence of a great drawing that uses very little conventional shading does not negate the importance of learning conventional shading. It's great to take those lessons and understand how to turn form in a proper academic way. The thing that you must understand, though, is that that is not a part of heavy metal drawing. Everything in this portrait, all the way down to how we render form, needs to rhyme with heavy metal intensity. The last point I want to bring up to round out this style guide relates to the process of making the drawing and a philosophy that I think he carries through it. Point number 8 is nothing risked, nothing gained. The drawings that we're going to make, just like Grebennekov's drawing, do not proceed calmly and in a linear fashion from the first lines of the block in safely through to the final rendering of the portrait. Each step is taken drastically, passionately, and with a great deal of risk of failure. It could be failure to achieve the kind of gradient or transition we're searching for. But we're going to have to experiment, we're going to have to go outside of our comfort zone, and we're going to have to arm ourselves with the belief that the risks we're going to take are necessary to manifest the goal that we're aiming for. I know it's a lot to ask of art students, but I think it's incredibly important if we're going to achieve what we set out to do.
Now that you've heard the bullet points in the style guide, it's important that you put them into action. After all, drawing is a practical endeavor. It's not just theoretical. If you want to do that, I hope that you'll join me on Patreon and go through all of the step-by-step instruction in this course so that you can figure out how to manifest your own personal style in your artwork.